Unlike other recent MCU movies, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 does not have a major end credit sequence, which is actually sort of refreshing because I think Marvel's been leaning a little too hard on end credit sequences for the past few films. They have guaranteed that Star-Lord will return, and Chris Pratt says it would be weird without James Gunn, but he'd do it. Of course he would. And I'm glad that he will. I would like to see Star-Lord return. But what about the rest of the team? James Gunn does offer a new lineup, which is weak sauce. There are a few keepers there, though. And also, it gives us actually a lot to discuss, which we're going to do right now. I'm going to break down who's on this lineup that James Gunn has left us with, who could be on a new team going forward, because no way this lineup sticks, who I think should take over the Guardians of the Galaxy movies after James Gunn, now that he's going to DC. I actually have some excellent choices. And what the next storyline could be for a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And then, of course, my fantasy draft picks for the team for the next movie. And I'm excited to hear yours as well. So like the Avengers, the Guardians of the Galaxy has always had a rotating roster. Heck, they're really supposed to be the Avengers of space. You know, the Avengers haven't really been rotating either, though. So this is new. This is changes. Changes are afoot in the MCU. We're getting a new Avengers lineup, and we're getting a new Guardians lineup. And it's fun. It's exciting. I'm having a good time. In the first Guardians of the Galaxy, 4 of the 5 members were on the 2008 relaunch of the comic, while Groot joined that comic just 1 year later. Mantis also joined the team around that time in the comics, while Nebula was a villain in the overall Marvel comics, just as she was first introduced in the MCU, and a connection to Thanos. Now remember, when the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out, it not only introduced the MCU cosmic corner of the world that Kevin Feige was building, but it also featured one of Thanos' first appearances. You know, they were quickly building out Marvel Cosmic because where do you think Thanos came from? But then James Gunn quickly lost interest in Thanos and moved away from the character. He didn't even put him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But in return, I guess, Kevin Feige let the Russo brothers play with Gunn's toys in Infinity War and Endgame, with mixed results. Even James Gunn has said it was difficult to write back from that, but I think he did it. I thought the whole story worked great. I don't like Infinity War as much as some of you, but I loved Endgame, and I love this Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think it worked beautiful. Then Yondu, Kraglin, and Cosmo were also all pulled from the Guardians of the Galaxy comics. There's been a lot of members, a lot of really like C and D level members, so there's a lot to pull from. Although, what was that guy, like Kragar or something, that Ravager? Again, he was awesome. All right, so how about this new lineup at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? I'd say this is a team put together by a creative, James Gunn, who's leaving the company. And he wants to leave on a good note, which means not forcing the hand of whoever comes after him by making bold choices for the new writer-director, right? This is a team where it's a nice little, it's not like a wow lineup, it's like an aw lineup. It's like a nice fitting end to James Gunn's run with the Guardians. And I think, again, as I said, it's a nice little pause, and someone else can hit start again when Kevin Feige decides who will take over this team. I'd also say that it's smart, again, to have a weaker lineup because then the end credit sequence doesn't overshadow the film itself. But they could have done a little better. I think they could have done a little better. Just generate a little more chatter. So who are some other Guardians of the Galaxy members from the comics who might have gotten a bit more of a reaction from audiences? Star Fox? Maybe? Do you think Harry Styles would come back? Do we want Harry Styles to come back? I think the Don't Worry Darling press tour and his performance kind of ended his acting career. Also, some people pointed out that Star Fox's power set might be a little problematic, and I think there's some truth to that. Beta Ray Bill. Oh, fans would have gone crazy if Beta Ray Bill had been there. And he's already been teased multiple times, once in a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, in the MCU. So the precedent has already been set. I think you could argue maybe that Beta Ray Bill should appear or officially debut in a Thor film, but like after Thor Love and Thunder, how long is it going to be until we get another Thor movie, like a pure Thor film? I think we'll see probably Chris Hemsworth return, and also Chris Hemsworth's going through some stuff personally. I think Chris Hemsworth will return as Thor, but I think it's kind of a race. Well, do you think, that's a question for you, do you think we'll see a Thor movie next or a Guardians of the Galaxy movie? Which do you think will come first? I actually would think it would maybe be I think that's a photo finish, but I guess I would say Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think you'll see Thor somewhere else, maybe on the team. All right. So Beta Ray Bill, Nova, right, who was supposed to maybe be getting his own show or movie, but he could have been teased here, especially since fans are already excited about him joining the MCU, either version, adult or child. And the Guardians of the Galaxy already introduced the Nova Corps. So again, there's a precedent. And then how about a Super Skrull? Oh, that could have been cool, especially with Secret Invasion right around the corner. You'd be like, I need to hear that story. How'd that happen? And then the MCU would oblige. All right, then there are other cool members that are likely right around the corner, right? But whose debuts deserve a bit more attention than an end credit sequence because they're a little more complex. And again, I don't think this lineup is sticking. So any of these characters I think could be right around the corner. Moondragon, that would be a big one. Drax's daughter, who ended up surviving, and she became another daughter of Thanos. He likes to adopt these girls and turn them into fighting machines, making her a sister of Gamora and Nebula. Ooh, although I have to say it would be hard to tell Moondragon's story with both Dave Bautista and Zoe Saldana saying see ya to the MCU. So I don't really know if they can do Moondragon after all. But who is she? Moondragon is basically Charles Xavier if he had like super strength abilities and super fighting powers, because she has this telepathy and telekinesis and his style choices, but she's also a skilled fighter who's juiced up like a super soldier and can fly. Now, speaking of lost sisters, there's also Thor's long-lost sister, Angela. And again, Thor has served with the Guardians of the Galaxy in the MCU and could again. Angela was won by Marvel in a legal battle with Spawn, and then what they did with her was they stuck her in their Guardians of the Galaxy books as a pretty big event. I mean, I remember when those comics were coming out, they were like, oh, here's Angela. And they didn't really have anything to do with the character. She kind of was just repetitive with Gamora. But with Zoe Saldana, again, saying she doesn't want to return as the character anymore, maybe Angela would be a great replacement instead of Saldana's suggestion that they recast Gamora, which I think would be blasphemous to fans. I don't think they should recast Gamora. I don't want them to recast in the MCU because they're just telling one continuous story. If someday they do a reboot, then fine. But Zoe Saldana is Gamora. Then, oh, I love this. Later on, as they got older, Wiccan, aka one of Wanda's sons, Billy, and a future Sorcerer Supreme, and his boyfriend, Hulkling, well, future husband actually, the lost Skrull Prince, who's also half Kree, and eventually unites, because they've never been friends, unites those two warring species. They've been on the Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, I like this. I like this so much. And if the rumors are correct that Hulkling isn't showing up in Secret Invasion or Agatha Coven of Chaos, what's taking him so long? Maybe a future Guardians of the Galaxy movie would be a great way to introduce him. Or if he's introduced in the Children's Crusade project that they have coming up after Agatha Coven of Chaos, well, maybe after that, he and Billy can then join the Guardians. I would actually rather see them do that than put them in a Young Avengers movie. The Young Avengers is supposed to introduce these characters, but because the MCU has decided to introduce them separately in other projects, I don't really want to see them come together. I don't want to watch a teeny bopper Avengers. I don't want to watch a Disney Channel Avengers movie. So I would love to see these characters just finding their way in the MCU, like Kate Bishop has been doing, who also, of course, was a Young Avengers member. Oh, I love so much for Wiccan and Hulkling to be on the new team. I think that would be great. And also, I'd like to add Captain Marvel to the Guardians of the Galaxy. I know, these are some controversial choices for some of you, but I really love them. She's been on the team in the comics. She spends a ton of time in space. That's her whole thing, right? So I think it's a great idea. Plus, Brie Larson's quirky performance is actually a really good fit with the Guardians of the Galaxy brand. And I think this would have been a better thing to do with her character than the backdoor A-Force movie that the Marvel seems to be. A-Force was never a particularly popular comic, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a particularly popular movie. I don't know why Kevin Feige wants to make all the mistakes that Marvel Comics have made instead of learning from them. All right, so who did we actually get in the lineup, right? Let's go through the lineup that James Gunn has left us with. Rocket Raccoon is now team leader, a position he has certainly earned. And as I said in my spoiler review, I do feel that having so many animals on this lineup is a great reflection of the message of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. There's also Cosmo the space dog, who's a telekinetic, and as well as the former Ravager pet. I don't know if he's an official member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but sure, why not? Who Adam Warlock has now adopted, and that's Blurp, voiced by Bad Batch's D. Bradley Baker. Wasn't Disney wasting all this great voice talent to do droids and little animals that don't really talk? I'm like, you don't need to hire freaking D. Bradley Baker, who has such a range, to do Blurp, unless someday Blurp talks, then bring it on. So while this is very sweet in this end credit sequence, I wouldn't keep Cosmo or Blurp going forward. I guess you have to keep Blurp because it's Adam Warlock's pet, but I wouldn't keep Cosmo. I just don't think these animals are on Rocket's level as evolution-wise, and they don't offer him a true peer. I mean, I'd rather have Howard the Duck on the team if we're looking for a pal for Rocket Raccoon, another friend, who, by the way, also showed up in a brief cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Groot is really big. You juicing Groot? I mean, he looks like he's also kind of made out of rocks now. And in fact, in the end credit sequence, he's camouflaged as a giant rock at the beginning. Maybe you're supposed to think he's a tumbleweed, but I thought that was a rock. And then there's Adam Warlock, who is definitely a keeper. He was on the original 2008 team, which the new movies have been based on, those comics. And then also that's Phyla-Vell, who Gunn has made a child, and we'll talk about her more in a moment. But first with Adam Warlock, he was a major part of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, but he totally missed that in the MCU. Just like Vision, he's powered by an Infinity Stone, and in the comics it's the Soul Stone. He has another great storyline, though, where an older evil version of himself travels back in time, and then they run into each other. But isn't this kind of like Kang meets Sentry? But still, I think a skilled writer-director could do something with that. I don't know, it's very Sentry, though. I don't know if they could. But, you know, Will Poulter's so talented and really didn't get to do very much here. But I thought he did great with what he had. And I think there's definitely something to do with this character going forward. And you could do a funny twist. You know, the other things, Kang and Sentry, are serious. Here you could do something funny with it because Guardians of the Galaxy is a comedic franchise. And Adam Warlock is just so delightfully powerful, we've got to keep him around. Then there's Phyla-Vell, an adult in the comics, but she was genetically created in the comics just as she is in the MCU by the High Evolutionary. In the comics, she's made from the genetic material of Mar-Vell, that's the Vell in her own name, a Kree surname, and she's part Kree. And she was also created by an Eternal, Elysius, and has some of those abilities as well. She's considered half Eternal, half Kree. Phyla-Vell might be a little bit too close to Captain Marvel, though, which is maybe why Gunn decided to make her a little girl in his lineup. She was even Captain Marvel for a time in the comics, officially, and she also wielded the quantum bands, which are rumored to be central to the plot of the Marvels movie. So I think she's a lot. Why not just bring on Captain Marvel if you're gonna? I mean, she's like a ripoff. And speaking of ripoffs, Kraglin, he's Yondu Light. I don't see Sean Gunn sticking around, certainly not as a main member. I mean, maybe I've kind of come to like Kraglin, kind of, you know, like it's kind of like the mascot of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So if he wants to show up occasionally at home base, you know, and do a last minute rescue now and then, I wouldn't object, but I don't see him being a main member of the team. And also he's going to be heading over to DC with his brother. He's already heavily entrenched in there, and I think he'll only become more deeply entrenched as, you know, if James Gunn works out over there. So when might we get another Guardians of the Galaxy movie? James Gunn would be a very tough act to follow, especially since I believe he ended on such a strong note. Not everybody agrees, but I think most fans are agreeing that this is a phenomenal goodbye to the MCU. And this is a franchise that has basically defined Gunn, at least so far. So again, tough act to follow. So I would expect Kevin Feige to take a beat here, especially since Feige has such a backlog of projects anyway that he has to get to. Once Superman Legacy is up and running, I don't know if it has to fully be released, but once it's like a thing and everybody's like, you know, we feel like it has its footing and James Gunn has fully transitioned to DC, then I think Kevin Feige can take a look at similarly quirky creative talent to take over the Guardians of the Galaxy brand. Too bad he and Edgar Wright didn't get along. But why didn't they get along? Maybe Edgar Wright isn't commercial enough because Edgar Wright hasn't really been able to blow anything up. He had a moment there with Baby Driver, but he squandered it. Where is Edgar Wright these days? John Mulaney and Bowen Yang have the right vibe, but even though they're both writers, they're largely on-air talents and they don't have any directing experience, really. So you know who I would consider? I actually love these two choices. My first is Gene Stupnitsky, who did Good Boys and the upcoming No Hard Feelings and has been working a lot with Seth Rogen. Great choice. I think he would be so good to fill in and take over from James Gunn. He has a very strong, quirky, comedic voice, and edgy. He has that edgy quality that Gunn brought to the Guardians. And then, you know who else I like? Maybe Kevin Feige could talk Bill Hader into doing comic book movies, because Barry has a great dark but also comedic vibe. Although Barry just made fun of comic book movies in the latest episode, but maybe they did that in a loving way, right? I don't know. I think it's worth a shot. As for where the team could go from here story-wise, Hulkling, along with Wiccan, could give a new direction to an upcoming movie with the whole Emperor Hulkling storyline. There was also the War of Kings storyline in the comics briefly. You know, the Guardians I don't think are particularly known for their storylines. Although feel free to debate that with me, Guardians of the Galaxy comic book fans, if there are any of you there. I mean, someone's buying the title. But anyway, the War of Kings storyline was the X-Men Shi'ar fighting the Kree and the Inhumans. You know, of course, those two groups connected. So in the MCU, you could do the Skrulls instead of the Shi'ar versus the Kree with the Eternals maybe, somehow. Maybe the Eternals, you don't know whose side the Eternals are going to take. But that would be, I think, a nice way to maybe, let's bring the Eternals over, because they're just floating off there on their own. It was weird. Let's bring them over here with the Guardians maybe and make this a little more cohesive. All right, fantasy draft pick time. So this is my Guardians of the Galaxy team, and I'm excited to hear your own rosters down below. So I would totally keep Rocket Raccoon as leading the team, with Groot beside him. They're fan favorites, they've earned it, definite. Then, because I really enjoyed him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and he was an OG member of the 2008 team, Adam Warlock. I think Will Poulter has a lot of gas left in the tank. I would like to see that. The rest of the team, get rid of this last lineup, go away. So here's who I would add. Wiccan and Hulkling, definitely. Then I was going to add Angela, but I wanted to see those wisps, CGI, you know, the ribbons that she has going around her. But I think she might be a bit too much like Adam Warlock, so I wouldn't do Angela. Do you think you'd throw Thor on this team? I don't know. I think what would Adam Warlock have to do then? Thor was a little bit tough because he was even repetitive with Star-Lord, so I don't think I would maybe do that. So I would add for female characters, and I want at least 2 women on the team. I'd bring back Nebula. Oh boy. And then you know who I might like to see on this team? Monica Rambeau. She spends a lot of time in space these days. I think she'd be a fantastic choice. Or another combo of 2 female characters would be, let's get the Shi'ar finally in here, Deathbird. Oh, I like that. But she's so much like Nebula, I don't think you can do both of them. So if I brought back Deathbird, or if I introduced Deathbird to the MCU, I would bring back Mantis then instead. That would be great. And then, I'm going for it, Kingo. Kumail Nanjiani was hilarious in Eternals, and I didn't think they did enough with him, and I think he's been teased a lot ever since. I'm excited for Kingo to return, and I think he would be a great addition to the Guardians of the Galaxy. And he would bring in the snark and humor that Chris Pratt, and maybe to some degree even Drax delivered. You know, he would bring the comedic relief to this team. I think he's a great choice. I love it. So that's my team. Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Adam Warlock, Kingo, Wiccan and Hulkling, and then either Nebula and Monica Rambeau or Deathbird and Mantis. All right, so what do your rosters look like, and who would you replace James Gunn with going forward with the Guardians of the Galaxy? And how long would you wait to bring back the team? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.